Good evening and welcome back to Checkpoint here on KTN News. Happy to have you with us. My guest this evening on the show is Cabinet Secretary, Industry, Trade and Cooperatives. That is Peter Munya. Thank you so much for making time for us this evening. So there is a lot to talk about tonight. And I want us to start with what I was describing earlier as we started the show. The small and medium enterprises, SMEs, and the traders had been lamenting pretty much about the issues they've had and that have interfered with their ability to run their businesses. And this saw the president visit the ICD, Inland Container Depot in Embakasi, twice, impromptu visit.
Yes.
I suppose just let's start there. You being the CS in charge, do you see that as a failure on your part that the president himself had to first conduct this impromptu visit, himself go there for issues to change, and we'll talk about the subsequent policy changes, but this should have happened with just you being there as CS to see the issues that are happening and be able to deal with them. Is that a failure on your part, sir?
First of all, I think we need to understand the context within which this problem came in. There was a crackdown, even before I joined the ministry, on illicit trade.
Right.
That brought in a committee, that brought in all the agencies that were engaged in managing the port. And because of that crackdown, there was tightening of processes at the port to deal with that problem of illicit trade and counterfeits flooding the markets. Now that crackdown led to too many agencies participating in the process of clearing goods, and it caused those delays. So it can't be entirely my fault. First of all, the port and ICN is run by Ports Authority. KEPS is just one of the agencies that operate at the port. The overall is actually Kenya Ports Authority. And some of the delays were not entirely KEPS. There is KRI, KEPS, KEFIS, even CID. In fact, 26 agencies since the crackdown have been participating at the port. All of them trying to do their work in terms of, and that is what has been the problem. And
that you have been talking then to each other. You say yes, rightfully, that it's not purely your mandate, but with your counterparts, your colleagues in cabinet.
In fact, we have been meeting. The president had even given that directive, we clear the goods for the small traders earlier. And we had managed to clear most of them. But there were still information that there were some of the goods that were not being traced. And it turned out that there were actually goods that had been destined for other countries that were brought in, as if they were meant for Uganda and South Sudan. And that's why we were not able to trace them, because that information was not coming through. So it's not that we didn't help. We cleared most of the goods, actually over 600 containers. There were 35 containers that had criminal processes that were under the DCI. And then there were those that eventually information came out when the president visited.
And yet then the president...
1,000 containers destined for other countries were stuck there.
Because if what you're saying is true... And the problem was
information. Those traders were not giving the relevant information.
But if what you're saying is true, sir, then if you are making progress and there was clearing of these containers and there was progress being made, as I mentioned, then the president needed not have come. So clearly there was still a very big problem.
The president came because, as I've told you, there were still containers that could not be traced.
The consolidation issue.
Yes, and the traders continued complaining. But were not able to give us the information. Some of them were afraid because those who know what it meant, having containers that are destined for other countries in the market. Others are small traders who actually don't know because they use consolidators to bring their goods, and they may not know what the consolidators may have done with the containers. So it was a gap of information that was not coming through until actually the second day, that was Monday, when we were talking to them as we were preparing for the president's visit. One of them disclosed, one of the consolidators disclosed that those 1,000 containers were actually containers disguised as goods meant for transit goods to Uganda and South Sudan.
So help me understand, the president after those two visits says we've figured the issues to be this consolidation, so there is evasion of taxes, because people are saying these are goods on transit, and yet some of them are coming in here and left in Kenya, so people don't pay taxes because of that. And of course, the whole counterfeit issue, as you mentioned earlier. So to deal with that, the president announces there will be, in fact, vetting of these officers that deal with consolidation to make sure we streamline these processes.
Yes.
And that in 3 weeks, all these containers must be processed.
Yes.
But then yesterday, he then appears to turn around, some would argue, and says, now we'll not even need to inspect the goods once they come to Kenya unless of a suspicion of various containers. So what led to that quick turnaround, if you'd explain to Kenyans? Because at the time there was, we're still going to inspect. In fact, we're going to just tighten the measures.
Yes.
Now we are not inspecting at all. We're leaving country of origin to do it.
I think there was no turnaround. It's again, people not understanding what the president was saying. The president was restating actually the position as it should be. The reason why we changed the law to provide for inspections abroad when you are importing goods, what we call PVOC, or pre-shipment certification of conformity, is to avoid inspections locally when the goods are there, and therefore quicken the process. So if your goods are inspected from where you are buying them, there is no need to inspect them again when they arrive in the country. And that's what the president was saying, concentrate on making sure the inspections from the country of origin is well done, so that when the goods come here, you don't require to inspect them again. And therefore, there was no contradiction. He was restating the law as it is, but the law has not been followed, because again, as I've said, all these agencies, 26 of them, all of them trying to clear goods and participate in the clearance, and made it very difficult for the specific agencies that are involved in clearance to do their job. Because if you are inspecting and, DCI looking at you and saying you must, check this, everybody is checking, that made it very difficult. But now there is clarity, because we've agreed, and government actually is in the process of setting new rules that will only have 4 agencies operating the port. That is KPA, KRI, KEBS, basically, and then the railways. 4 agencies largely will be the ones allowed to operate in the port on a day-to-day basis. So that reduces from 26 to 4. That will make work much easier in the clearance of goods. So he was restating a law, a policy that has been passed, but that was not being observed by all the agencies that are operating there.
Okay.
And the earlier statement was obviously, it was giving room for the small businesses whose goods are stuck in the ICD and also in Mombasa to be assisted for those goods to be cleared. And of course, some of them be inspected if they arrived without inspection. And then if some have not paid taxes, because some of them are understated, some of them do not have clear information on what is inside, because they are consolidated goods. He was saying, clear those, help the small businesses access their goods, and then go back to the normal way of making goods come in without engaging in inspection of all the goods when they already have been inspected.
When they're already there. And it makes sense what you're saying, sir. So to the question of then accountability.
Yes.
Because we still have a problem of counterfeit. We've had that all along. So that I suppose why these agencies and so many of them wanted to have a hand is because everyone wanted to make sure when the questions are asked at the point the ball is dropped, at the point there's counterfeit, poisonous goods in the market, there's somewhere you can say it's this office that did not play its role. So what happens now? Because we're still not dealt with counterfeits coming into the market. We cannot say that by this policy change that will stop happening.
Yeah, the policy change will help in many ways, because we want to enhance the PVOC. So some of the checks that you are supposed to do there, we transfer them to be checked abroad, so that now we will have an enhanced PVOC system that includes all these other things that these agencies are trying to check. Then, of course, there is the usual random sampling, where you do scientific checking. You don't check every container, but you check some of the containers that could be the most risky ones. There is a categorization that is usually done. There are those very safe ones, those big companies that import all every time, and they import from established industries that have been checked and found to be okay. Those ones sometimes are given what is called green channel. You don't keep checking them again. But there are those who are to consolidate where there could be danger. And that's where you do random sampling, not again checking every container.
So even there at country of origin, there will not be 100% check, it's still random?
From the country of origin is 100%.
Okay, it's 100%. Okay.
When they come here is when you do random sampling, so that you can be sure that there is no danger. Because those people out there also could, because there are people employed by the government to do the checking.
Right.
They could also use that when they know there is no checking. They could also use that opportunity to bring things that are counterfeit or substandard.
And let's talk about that.
Random sampling helps in detecting the possibility of counterfeits. Because there is the usual screening also that will eventually you are putting things that you know. If you have the clearance clothes you are put in, and then during the screening, machinery are seen inside. Again, you open. So,
because I understand it's government that contracts these individuals that inspect from country of origin. So back to the question of accountability. Because I ask that because last year we saw the MD Kebs and I believe it was 9 other officers interdicted and charged in court, in fact, with was it conspiracy, attempted murder that it was. And of allegations of fertilizer that was poisonous, laced with mercury. And so they were seen to have dropped the ball. They did not protect Kenyans in essence in standards. And not what we know now is that this matter has morphed so much that there has been a deal reached with the DPP that in fact this fertilizer is now in the market. Remember at the time this matter was going to court and they were being charged, it was said to be poisonous. Now there are some of these charged individuals who have been set free, and out of court settlement of sorts has been reached where a deal has been penned down, and it has been said that in fact this fertilizer that had been held up in custody has been released to the market, not taken out to be destroyed as you'd imagine, because earlier we were told it was poisonous, to be banned. So all of this becomes very confusing, but to the point of who is held accountable first when then we transfer this mandate to other countries.
First of all, I would want to say those companies that do inspect goods abroad, there is a procurement process where an advertisement is made and companies apply, and then there is a criteria for checking whether they have the ability to provide those services. And officers from KEBS travel all the way to check their laboratories and to check processes, and then pick those companies. And many of these companies are global companies that are involved in standards. They are well-known companies like SGS, Bureau Veritas, companies that operate globally and provide these services to other ports across the world. And they have reach in all corners of the world. Those are the companies that are pre-qualified and then given that service of assisting government in the country of origin to inspect. Some of the companies also are actually government agencies like KEBS that is also given that mandate, that has also capacity. Like for example, in China is a government company that does that work. Like they are KEBS, you allow them to participate in the processing. So of course you can't be 100% sure, but those are the safeguards we are putting in, the ones I'm telling you, random sampling, then intelligent-led investigations, because you also get information. You have intelligence gathering all over. And then there is also market surveillance. You go into the market and pick samples of goods that have come in, and you test them.
So when counterfeit goods or products in some way end up in Kenya, some other poisonous fertilizer, like we were told the last time.
I was trying to explain about the fertilizer. The case is still pending in court. So I may not be able to really comment.
But to the point that what caused these officials to be... What I know
is that those who are released were officers of one of the foreign companies that deals in fertilizer, that is known to sell quality fertilizer in the world. And there was clear indication that the fertilizer that was in the warehouse that was released eventually to the market did not have any problem. That was, they say, the samples that they had picked were from a different consignment. Now, I can't go into the integrity of that.
Yes.
But I can confirm to the public that that fertilizer is safe, because even the investigation agencies themselves said that particular consignment that was being released are no issue.
So, away from that, in a different scenario, when something substandard, poisonous, counterfeit comes to Kenya, who will be held accountable?
Well, it depends. If, for example, those particular goods aren't been inspected and brought as they should, and they come into a market, and investigation show that they were counterfeit, then the company that has been given that work to check quality out there is responsible, and there is a law to deal with it. You suspend them, you can fine them, and you can prosecute them. And indeed, we have already, during the crackdown, we already suspended 2 companies, and we even fined them millions of shillings. And even now, we've not lifted their suspension. So there is levels of responsibility that you can apportion, depending on how those goods found their way here. Of course, goods can also be contaminated in the warehouses. You can bring goods that are safe, and when they come, the storage is poor, and then contamination can take place there. So again, you will then deal with whoever is responsible at that particular point in time.
So some watching perhaps tonight who have their goods at ICD would wonder, the directive yesterday, does it apply to them? So can they tomorrow, without inspection, collect their goods, or do they still have to go through? When does it start taking effect?
As I said, the president did say you pick them without inspection. No, we sat down with the small traders, and even that process is going on now between our officers, KRI, Kenya Ports Authority, KEBS, and those association of small traders to identify those particular containers. We already agreed that there are 1,000, and there could even be more. Identify them, then inspect them.
So the ones under suspicion will be the only ones to be?
They won't be inspected. Because they are already here anyway, and they have been there. The whole exercise is to help those goods be cleared for them to access them. But safeguards will be made in terms of inspecting to make sure there is nothing harmful. And then the specific small traders will access their goods. Of course, there are also the president committed to waive the storage, because they have been there. If they were charged the storage fees, that will be too punitive, and other charges. So I think it is the right thing to do, so that the small people who are doing business can be able to access their goods and continue with their businesses.
Then talk to us also about the second policy directive or announcement the president made yesterday about the pending bills that he said must be cleared, because again, it's the small and medium enterprises that are largely affected. So we understand national government owing them 350 billion shillings, counties perhaps 100 billion shillings. So he said he's directed the Treasury with all the accounting officers to ensure this is settled.
Yes, even before I come to that, remember he also directed that these consolidators also be vetted. And also be gazetted. And then the small traders be required to import their goods through the consolidators who are vetted, to avoid the mix-up we are in now, where a consolidator trying to avoid taxes declares goods as transit goods, only to divert them to the market. And the small trader who has put goods in that container may not be aware of that. So the whole idea is gazette the consolidators, vet them, and then when you are declaring goods, declare them in 2 categories. The original Bureau of Landing that gives the general information, and then a secondary Bureau of Landing that gives specific information on who has imported those goods in the container, so that you can be able to identify the small guy who may not be involved in this ring, who innocently have put their goods there and who are caught up in the mess, so that you are able to clear them and then deal with the consolidator if the consolidator is the problem. And then, of course, if you have vetted them and you are monitoring them, then you avoid those dangers that come with that, and then you make it easy for small people also to trade, because they are right to.
So now, to the traders, you owe them a lot of money, and the president says clear this in 30 days. The question is it feasible? Is it practical? Is it possible? Or was it simply a populist announcement, because I say that the budget making process is in its very final stages. Supplementary budget already out, supplementary 2 in fact, and this money was clearly not in any of these supplementaries, so it has not been factored.
No, this money was, because these are pending bills. These are bills that have been incurred by government in this financial year.
Even before, this is just this financial year, hasn't it been?
This financial year is ending this month, it's ending in June.
Right.
And naturally, this is the time to clear bills. So it's not unrealistic, it is most realistic, because you spend the supplementary money by clearing these bills. Because when you do supplementary, you take care of bills that have been accumulating over the year that are not paid.
But my understanding is
the president was giving a directive to give priority to the agpo, the small traders who have been accessing government businesses, to be paid first before the bigger players are paid. So there is enough money.
I spoke to those to contest that to the chairman of the budget committee in the National Assembly to ask that specific question, just so that I'm prepared for this interview.
Yes.
And he said, in fact, he gave me that information, that this money has not been factored, that in fact they are set to have a meeting with Treasury to figure out where this money then comes from. So as it stands now, in a country that is cash crunch is a current issue, we are borrowing a lot, he says this is not money that's been factored, 350 billion shillings, they'll need to figure out where it begins to come from in a span of a month.
Let me give you even more information, because the truth is the money is factored in. The cabinet subcommittee has been working on the figures.
Okay.
Even before. The president doesn't just make announcements. The background work is done, and then the specific information is given to him before he makes the announcement. The cabinet coordinating committee where we sit has been working on specifics, and we know around 15 billion is owed by the counties to small businesses, and around 10 billion is owed by the national government. And the Auditor General has been doing audits to determine those that are payable, and they had already concluded the audits both at the national and county level. So it is a question of the government now prioritizing the payments.
Okay.
And there is no money written, this one is for small businesses, this one is for big businesses.
Okay.
You utilize the money available at the end of the year to clear whatever bills you feel you should clear. And with the president directive, they will spend the money clearing. And I know there is a meeting actually tomorrow. All PS is meeting to discuss and give reports on how much they are paid already. Okay. Because even before the announcement, the president had already internally told all, all accounting officers to start preparing to pay these small traders. Okay. So I think the liquidity is going to improve. Small traders will be able to access their money. And then safeguards will be put in place to make sure we don't come to a situation like this in the future.
In the future. And of course, that the president also saying those with pending audit queries will not perhaps have that timeline of 30 days. Those will need to be processed fast. You are watching Checkpoint here on KTN News. We want to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk more about the policy and directives on old second-hand, if you like, spare parts, motor vehicle spare parts as well. So many questions many of you have sent, so we'll discuss that with CS Munya, and keep your questions coming as well. I'll put them to him.